I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha,
You
and
want to
tonight
spotlight yourself?
I did.
Did you?
Yep.
Huh.
Tonight I'll do a fly tying demonstration on two similar flies with different wing styles that represent big mayflies. But we begin, I have a few announcements. Next Thursday, April 4th, our Zoom call will be viewer's choice. And this is where you can bring up techniques that you're struggling with, or tools or materials that you want to understand better, or a fly pattern or a style of fly that you want me to demonstrate. Just in case, I'll have a couple flies ready to demo if we need to fill up the rest of the hour. On April 11th, we'll have a guest, Tim Jacobs from Colorado. I met him at the Denver Fly Fishing Show. The exact topic is still being worked out with him, but he's an expert fly tyer, especially with deer hair. He's an author and he's on the Nature Spirit Pro staff. So, he must be good with deer hair. April 18th is session 5 of the beginner fly tying class. And that will be a classic fly called the Zug Bug. Features tying with peacock herl and wrapping a soft tackle. And then April 25th, I'll demo a couple of flies that could be used for bass and crappie in this area, or trout, or basically any fish that eats smaller fish. Tim Flagler will present for us again this year. December 5th is the current date, but they'll let us know if something pops up sooner. His YouTube channel is Tightline Productions, and he has a video coming out pretty soon that will be a treat for John, the pewterbaugh caddis. Should be coming out in a day or two, I think. He also has a recent short video on his son blue lining in New Jersey. It's just like a couple minutes, but it's kind of cool little video. I think they're going to do a few more of those. John, do you have any announcements before we get started?
Yeah, I do. April is got potential to be a very busy month for us, and newsletter will be coming out the first of the month, which will be next Monday, I believe, this coming Monday. But the big thing that I'd like you all to put in the back of your mind is that I believe it's the last weekend in April. The Des Moines program has invited us to join them in the driftless area. We've got slots for a volunteer and 2 veterans to go. Unfortunately, I have to go to Bennett Spring about a week or so ahead of that time, so my travel time will be all burned up for the month of April. But so anybody that wants to go, I'm looking for a trip lead volunteer and 2 veterans. Hotels are paid for, food's paid for, gas is paid for, everything's paid for. You'll just have to provide some sort of transportation to and from. And that'll be in the newsletter. So if you see anybody, pass that on to them. Of course, you got to be in the CRM. You got to be a member of Healing Waters to go. So we got you covered by insurance and everything. So other than that, that's about it, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Yep. Okay, I'm going to share screen here. So like I said, these flies tonight were designed to represent big mayflies. A lot of these are up around northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. I'm sure some of the other northern states.
We got them in Storm Lake.
You have them in Storm Lake. They're huge,
by the bazillion.
right? A lot of people call them fish flies. Some of the locals call it a caddis hatch. Of course, it has nothing to do with caddis flies, but that's what they call them. Drakes and hex flies, which are they're very similar, large, long-bodied mayflies. The only differences that I've been able to see is that adult drakes have 3 tails and hexagenia have 2 tails. So it looks like these are hex flies. that shows you how big they are on somebody's fingers. And they are very thick. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of times radar can pick up the swarms of them in the Great Lakes and stuff. And that's what they do in some areas. So the odd thing is, I would think that, there'd be a whole lot of fishing with these during the day, and maybe there's some, but it seems like most of these, they talk about fishing them in the late evening till about like maybe 10:30 at night. So the first one we're going to do is Robert's Drake. It was developed in the late 50s by Clarence Roberts of Michigan. It was tied with a parachute wing made of deer belly hair. I'll actually be doing this as a green drake by substituting a few materials. And, this is really, these were originally designed to be large mayflies, but even Kelly Gallup ties them down to, I think he said, a size 16. So by changing the colors and some of the materials, you can imitate just about any mayfly species. But they work really good for these big ones. You've got to use a pretty good size hook, and you need a lot of buoyant materials to be able to float that hook. And really, for out west, where there's a lot of fast water, these would really make sure that fly stays floating a lot, and then it'd really be a really good indicator fly in a dry dropper if you want to use something different than like everybody uses a chubby Chernobyl or a hippie stomper or one of those kind of things.
Mike, what is chart tying thread?
Chartreuse.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, I'll
never
go
mind.
back. Sorry about that. I just, let me share that again. It's tied on a long hook. I mean, they're a long-bodied mayfly, and the original of this Roberts Drake was had pheasant tail for a tail. You can tell this is using moose, and that's what I'll use. Pheasant tail, would break pretty easily, but moose is pretty sturdy stuff. The body is whatever color of deer hair you want it to be. I'm going to use olive. I think I may use black tying thread. And the thorax, just to clean it up. They show this with deer hair all the way to the front. But that's with a parachute post, the way they're doing it right there. I think the way I'm going to do my parachute post, I think I'm just going to tie off my body on the side of the wing and then use a little bit of dubbing to clean it up. And I'll use a grizzly chartreuse hackle. So this is my rendition. That's a little bit short of a parachute post. For the materials, for the tail, I'm going to use moose body hair. My wing is going to be gray polypropylene yarn, poly yarn. And the body will be, I just have some olive. This is actually spinning deer hair. A lot of times, you use the certain hair for tails and wings. But since this is the only olive I have, I'll show you how to kind of overcome the flaring that you need. But it's also good on these types of flies. You want them to be buoyant, so you want some of that buoyant hair. And then I've got a cheap saddle patch from Cabela's with some I already pre-selected a feather to use for the hackle on that. I'm just going to use 6/0 thread, and then I'll use some of this SLF dubbing for to clean up that front thorax area. So back to the device. This is a 2X long hook. I think this is about a 8, size 8 or 8, or it wouldn't be a 6. It'd have to be an 8. So I'm going to start my thread a little behind the eye, about an eye length back. Just go down, whoa, go down about halfway, and then clip that off. Now I'm going to come back to where I'm going to put my wing. And I think I'm going to put that in first. So I want my post to be right about there. So I'm going to take a length of this. This I got from Hairline, but you could use any poly yarn. Comes on a card like this. I'm going to take a pretty long piece. Maybe this looks like about 2 card lengths. Like that. Just so I know I have enough. And I'm going to tie this in with a little bit hanging out over the eye. Nice and tight. Take some real tight wraps, and then with the rest of that hanging over the eye, I'm going to cut that at an angle. Like that.
Hey, Mike, excuse me, but could you highlight just you on the screen?
I am spotlighted, ain't I?
I
You
see
are
your
to
fly.
me,
What you
Mike.
working on, Mike?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm spotlighted. That's all I can do.
yeah. Walt, check your view. Make sure you're in speaker view
There you
and
go.
not gallery.
Is everything okay? All right.
Looks good.
This is about where I want my parachute post to be. So I've got that tied down with a little bit of a slope there, so I don't have too much bulk. And then I'm going to just come back actually to the other side here. And I'm going to take that poly yarn and twist it severely. Twist it up real tight. And then maybe a little bit tighter. And then I'm going to fold it over, about an inch up, way longer than what I'll need. And let it furl like that. And then I'll just take a wrap to hold that in place. Then I'll take this remainder and I'll start wrapping it back toward the back. Nice tight wraps. And then with the rest of that, I'm going to take another severe angle. Make sure I get it all here. So now what I've done is, instead of having a big lump there where I tied in that wing post, I have one leg of the post comes out the back and the other one is out the front. And this helps me taper the body a little bit. I'm going to come back to that wing. Take some wraps right up close to the post on both sides. And then because that's furled like that, it's pretty stiff. So I'm able to, without using any hackle gallows or any kind of fancy stuff. I'm not even holding that post. And just wrap up the post.
How much pressure are you using, Mike? Basically,
Just
you're not
kind of
spooling any
medium.
line out.
Yeah, I'm kind of using medium pressure here. You can see the hook is moving. And so that gives me a nice parachute post, but I don't have poly spread out all over the place, getting in the way. I'm actually going to leave that like that until the very last step of the fly. So the next step is going to be to tie in the tail. So I'm going to come over here where you can see it, I guess. And I'm going to take just maybe 9 or 5. I don't know if Paul Fidelis is on here. About 9 or 5 moose hairs there. And bring them over so you can see it. So I've got those hairs and then some shorter ones. I'll just grab these longer tips and just pull the shorter stuff and the fuzz away. All I've got left is those. And these don't necessarily have to be even tips, but I'll go ahead and stack it. Just put it in my stacker, and doesn't take much since there's only about 5 or 6 hairs there. Now, the length of these, I want them to hang out quite a ways past the bend of the hook. So I want just about a solid hook length for the length of that tail. I'm going to transfer that back to the bend of the hook. So now as I wrap these forward, kind of lifting up so I keep them on top of the hook. And as I get out here toward the end, I don't want them to flare real bad. So I'm going to take some just kind of medium tension wraps right there at the end of the shank. And then I'll come back forward to about there. Clip these moose hairs out of here. Now for the body, I'm going to use this, again, this olive deer hair. And cut it off close to the hide. Zoom out some here. Some of these are real long. I'll just take those out since I have too much. And then I'll take these longest ones and grab those. And then I'll pull out all of this short stuff and the under fur, the fuzz. So I'm left with a nice clean bundle of hair there. And I will stack this. Now I want the tips of the hair to be in the back of the fly, so I'm taking it out of my stacker this way. So then when I grab those tips, I don't have to switch hands. It's in the right orientation. I want these tips to extend a little bit past bend of the hook. It almost looks like a little elk hair caddis on the end of there. So I'm going to measure that with my fingers to where I think it's the right length, which would be right about there. And then I'll transfer it to this hand and cut it at that point, because I don't want to have to try to cut it around my parachute post. I cut it nice and clean right there. And then I'll lay it down against the shank. Now I'll spin my bobbin counterclockwise as if I was looking down on it. And that makes the thread reach backwards and catch those tips. And I just want to grab a little bit of those tips and come down and then flare it like that.
Yeah,
So
you
I
went
get just
fuzzy,
like,
Mike.
pardon me?
The hook, you're kind of a little bit out of focus. There you go. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
So basically I just wrapped it around there and then just pulled tight, pinching it so it's on top. So I get it flared like that. And I can go through those butts a little bit just to make sure that's tied down well. And now the key to this fly is I want to go back. First, I want to take this deer hair and just kind of press down, because in this case, I want this to actually come down around to the bottom of the hook. So then I'm going to start coming backwards with spaced wraps, but I'm not pulling real tight at this point. I want a little bit of air to be trapped and a little bit of that hollow hair to stay intact until I get to the bend of the hook. And then I'm going to flare down. I'm going to tighten it and do a few wraps like that. And that's going to flare that out. Now I'll come back across with medium wraps until I get to the front, and then I can go tight again. I broke one hair here, so I'm going to cut that out of the way. So what that gives me is I have a segmented body because of the black thread. I have deer hair on the body, which there's a little bit of air trapped in there. But this flared hair at the tail here really helps to float that fly and keep that bend of the hook from breaking the meniscus on the water. So now I'm ready to put in the hackle, and I pre-selected one. Here it is. This is a stupid long hackle. Probably a size 8 or 10, and that's pretty hard to find nowadays, unless you do buy a cheaper neck. So if you look at this on the bend of the hook, that's almost, well, it's a hook and a half gap, about a gap and a half or almost 2 gaps in length. But this is for a parachute, so I'm going to tie this in so I have a little bit. The way I'm holding this, I'll zoom in some. I have, where's my light? The way I want to tie this in is, if you can see at the top of my posted parachute where the black thread is, right here, my hackle stem goes up that post. So now I'm going to wrap up the post, but I still have some bare stem sticking up above. So when I start to wrap that hackle, it's not going to, it's going to lay nice, and it's not going to go all over the place. So I'll wrap back down, and then I'll just make sure that stem is tied good forward here. And cut off the rest of that stem. Now I want to clean up that area with some of this SLF dubbing. I think for this, probably a little bit darker, maybe this brown olive. I'll tease some of that out of there. And zoom out some. I'll just twist that on clockwise onto my thread. Clockwise as if I was standing on top of the hook. About a good 2.5 inch dubbing noodle. And I just want to work my way back here. Cross over and cover up those deer butts. Back through. Make a nice thorax there. Maybe just a wee bit there at the front. Until I watched Davey McPhail the other day. And should give me enough. But I want my thread to be up there next to that post. So I'm just going to sneak it over there. And I'm going to take this hackle. I should use a hackle plier so I don't end up losing it. There's a good one. Now as I wrap that hackle around, give me a nice parachute hackle. And then I'm going to take my thread and just come up and actually go up that post a little bit through the hackle. Come back down, and then I'll go up to the front. Clip out that excess hackle. And then tie in a little head. And whip finish. Now I kind of make sure my hackle's all straightened out, and then just decide how long I want that post to be. Like I said, that other one that I had, this one was tied with pheasant tail. But that post I think is just a little bit short. I want to come up a little bit farther, make it a little bit taller wing, and cut that. And then I can take my bodkin and tease. I got some that was at the edge of that card. I have to work the twists out of it here. That was at the fold, where it folds around the cardboard. I have never been able to do parachute posts, but doing it that way by furling it, that all seems pretty easy to me. So that's the Roberts Drake done in a green Drake coloring. It's easy with this too, but I'm going to work a little bit in there where that hackle is. and then a little bit on the head. Now, one weakness of this fly, the kryptonite, is of course the thread that that wraps around that body, but I don't want to put a whole lot of glue on that deer hair at all. I say if I catch a couple of fish that are worthy of tearing that thread and tearing the fly apart, then it did its job. But that's how both of these are designed, using tying thread as the rib. But again, the way that sits on the water, that tail really keeps, the heaviest part of the hook, of course, is where all this bend is and comes under. And when that flops down on the water, and they do when they, most of the, like I said, they fish them in the evenings, and a lot of times that's the spinner fall, where the adults fall to the surface. And they really, when they hit the water, I mean, they really flop on the water and they vibrate. So you don't have to worry about for one thing, it's in the dark, so you don't have to worry about a perfect drift or a nice sensitive cast or anything like that. Big old thing like this will flop down on the water, but you won't lose that. You won't break the meniscus because of all that hair hanging out of the back. Now I'm going to do two different wing styles with these, but you could take poly yarn and have the wings stick out to the sides like a spinner. And I mean, that's another style that's commonly tied, is with spinner wings. The one that they use when there's like no moon and it's real dark conditions, sounds counterintuitive, but the body is mostly black. It's moose hair for the body, where I use deer hair. It's actually moose for the whole body, so that's black, and then the wing is purple, and then it's like a dark hackle, like a dark gray hackle. So Walt, for this post again, this is a bigger hook, so I'm using a whole piece of poly yarn. This is kind of thick stuff. But basically, I decide where I want my post to be. So I want to go back maybe a little less than a quarter of the hook shank there. And then I'll leave a little bit hanging over the eye, more than I know I'll need. And then tie it in, pinching it so it doesn't roll around, and do some real tight wraps just to get that to stay put. I actually went back too far because I did so many wraps. I'm going to go toward the eye with my wraps. So that way my post will be in the right place. But before I get too far, I want to make a little taper there. So I'm going to take my scissors and lay them horizontal and lay that material over. So when I cut it, it's at an angle like that. So then I can tie down that front part, so it's a nice ramp for either for wrapping hackle or whatever you're going to do there. So this is where I want my post. I'm going to twist this up. Twist it clockwise. If you're in Australia, you twist it counterclockwise.
Mike, could you zoom out so we can see,
Yeah.
so Walt can see everything?
I'm too focused on doing my Australia joke for Paul.
Yeah, I know.
I
I
don't even
know.
know if he's on here tonight.
Yeah, he is. He just showed up a
Okay.
little bit ago.
All right. So I'm twisting it up really tight. You can see it's almost starting to furl on itself. And then about an inch, longer than I think I'm going to need for the wing, I'll just fold it back and hold it tight against the hook and let it furl like that. And I'll take a tight wrap around there so I don't lose it. But then I'll work this back toward the back. Couple real good tight wraps to hold it in place, and then do the same thing. Scissors horizontal, and hold it at an angle. So when I cut that, it gives me a taper. So then wrap down and then back up, I've got a nice taper there instead of having a big bump where this stuff was tied off. Then I'll just kind of come up and clean up that base of the post a little bit. And now with that being rigid from being furrowed like that, I can just wrap around, wrap thread around there to post that. And go up as far as I want to have my hackle. So usually about that far. And then I can go on with the rest of the materials. Then when I'm done, just, you know, hackles all in place and everything's done. The last thing, even finish off the head and cut the thread off. The last thing is to decide how tall you want your wing to be and then cut it at that height. And then you can just either Velcro or needle.
Is there a set height for a post? Any exact measurement?
It's kind of, especially on these flies that you're fishing at night, it doesn't matter because the fish isn't seeing it. So it's, and you really can't see the fly. I would say if you're just tying like a parachute fly, you're going to tie in the daytime. I would stick with usually it's a standard of a hook shank in length. So
Okay,
use my other scissors so I can, so it would be from the eye to the end of the shank, which is straight above the barb. So that would be your length, the height of your post. So just about where I have it there, maybe a tad shorter. And then you can put in your hackle. And if you think it looks a little bit long, you can always trim it. A lot of people even bring a scissors to the stream side. And if they take a fly out and they look at it and it just doesn't look right, they can, you know, give it a little haircut.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Roger, did you get that so that I can follow you up?
Memorized, yeah, right.
That was a Tim Flagler trick. I can't take credit for that. But I'll tell you what, like I said, I always hated parachutes. I could never get it to work out right. And that's the only way I can get it to work. The other one is kind of cool looking. Another thing I've never done until the other day is a wally wing. So this is Kelly Gallup's version. I think I said the one I tied before, the Roberts Drake. That was like in the 1950s. In the early 70s, Kelly Gallup, I can put things away later. Kelly Gallup developed a fly he called the Troutsman HEX. It was designed for the Manistee River in Michigan. He had his first fly shop up there. It was called the Troutsman Fly Shop. So the fly was named after the fly shop or whatever. It was his first fly that actually went national. So the one that, if you look, the bottom is yellow. Light doesn't look very good. The bottom is yellow. And then the top is very similar to what we did before, only you keep the deer hair on the top. And then for the hackle, it's a mix of brown and grizzly, just like an Adams. But other than that, it's a very similar fly. Kelly Gallup ties it with calf tail wings, split wings, like on wolf flies. But I thought it'd look cool with a wally wing, so I figured I'd give that a go. It worked when I did it the other day, so hopefully it'll work tonight. So I'll mount my hook, and this time a little bit different materials. So I'm not going to use this hackle.
Mike, what's the hook size?
This is actually, this is an 8.
8, okay.
Yeah, they're big mayflies. So yeah, we're on the materials. So I'm going to use mallard. That's just mallard flank that I cleaned all the fuzz off of. Mallard flank for the wing, and then for the underbody will be yellow bucktail. The tail again is going to be moose, and this is just some deer hair from the side. We want it to flare a little bit, and then I already selected some grizzly and brown hackle. It's going to be more of a standard dry fly hackle this time. So zoom out some. I usually end up too close to the fly. So
How'd you go?
Well, Charlie House.
I'll go back an eye length back so I make sure I don't crowd the head. And I'll go ahead and lay a thread base all the way. Back to the end of the shank. I kind of wanted to use gray on this one. I'm going to use gray. Well, that black though, I think will give. The one I tied the other day was gray. I'm just going to stick with this black since I already have it on there. It'll also give kind of a more pronounced rib. So I'm at the end of the shank. I'm going to tie in the moose. Take 9 or 5 of these moose hairs. Clean out the fuzz from the base of it. And I'll put them in my stacker. If I can find my stacker. These are kind of messed up, so I'll do the Al Beatty version where you put the butts in first. So let's see what we got. There's a few too many, so I'm just going to take a couple of these shorter ones out. And maybe take that one out. That should be enough. I'll do the same, measure the tail to be a full hook length, and then transfer that back to the back. I'll do a kind of a medium wrap, and then as I go back further, then I'll start to really torque down on it, and that'll keep from really flaring that out. Moose hair is pretty strong, dense stuff, but it will flare a little bit. And I don't want it to flare too much, so bring that forward a little ways and clip it.
Hey, Mike, since I don't have moose hair, can I use organza maybe? Like black organza? Paul or anybody chime in?
Well, I'll tell you what, for any of this, for the tail, you mean? You could use brush
Yeah.
fibers, like Paul uses brush fibers for this kind of thing. You could use pheasant tail if you wanted. You could use long, if you have some real long hackle, you could use that for tails. But moose is really sturdy, and it also has a little bit of flotation. It's stiff also. If it's too, I don't know about the organza. If it's too like soft and loose,
Yeah.
then it may not support the fly. So you want it to be stiff. Let's see here. I want to do the wing first, or I think I'll do the wing last. So the next material then is going to be the underbody. So I'm going to grab some yellow bucktail. I want it to cover about the bottom half of the hook, so I'm just going to kind of guess about that much. I was a little bit light on that last fly. So I'm going to take out the shorter stuff here. And you don't really have to stack this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cut some of these tips so I don't have so much on here. And I'm going to tie this in. Tie it in by the butts where they're thicker. Got some blood on there, but I haven't got it on the fly yet. I'm going to cut those butts even again. And then spin my thread counterclockwise. So it'll make sure it comes back and grabs those tips. And then hold it nice and tight. I'll just flare those tips. Now, bucktail doesn't flare as good as regular deer hair. I'm going to get it nice and tight, but then I'm going to twist it around to where it comes underneath.
Can I ask a question about bucktail, Mike?
Yeah.
I've got some bucktail, but it almost looks like cattail. It's really crinkly. Is that usable or unusable? It's just ended up what came from Cabela's.
It's usable. It depends on how, you know, I guess what you want for the look. Like, say for this yellow, this is a little bit crinkly.
Uh-huh.
I use it for like Mickey fins. That's usually what I use the yellow stuff for. I kind of like a little bit of a crinkly look in some of those bucktail streamers, because
Okay.
it just kind of gives it a little bit more depth,
Okay.
I guess.
The last
So
question.
it's
Go ahead.
a preference thing. You can use it if you want.
Thank you.
I think I went back too far with my wraps there. Nope, my wing will be there. I'll be all right. So now I'm going to take my thread and spin it clockwise. I'm sorry. Yeah, clockwise as if I was looking down on it to cord it up. And then trying to think how this. I just tied one of these the other day. So I'm going to go ahead and tie these back, keeping that on the bottom as much as possible. Back to the end.
Hey, Mike, I got a question.
Yes.
You know the Bagley method of, how he does his half hitches, with the bodkin?
Right.
I wonder if that would allow you to be able to go straight across the bottom with uniform ribbing. You see me do that with foam flies, and some other things.
Right.
I don't know, just curious.
So that's why I was a little bit confused as I was thinking about the wraps showing. I just want to get this tied down nice and tight.
Bill, I
because
think if
you-
it was me and I was concerned about uniform ribbing, I'd use the rotary feature of the vise.
right, but I'm not. But what I'm doing here, the underbelly, I actually was just tying that down onto the hook shank. The actual underbelly is folding this forward. And that's what's going to show for the underbelly.
I've got
That's going to be the
a,
underbelly.
I got an off the wall question. When you're talking about counterclockwise and clockwise, counterclockwise opens up the thread fibers, right?
So yeah, if you were say looking from up above, looking from this direction, if you spin your normally as you're wrapping your thread, you impart a clockwise twist into the thread. So as you're wrapping your thread onto the hook and all of that, you start to develop a twist in your thread. So if you get quite a bit of a twist, if you're going to try to make a loose wrap, as you go forward, the thread wants to go toward the eye of the hook. And that's just because of the twist that you've imparted into that thread. So if you take that thread and spin it counterclockwise, as if you were looking down on it, then when you reach back, when you loosen it up, it wants to lean over toward your fingers. So it's easier to grab the materials. So I did that to tie down the deer hair, but then I want to actually make, if I want to make ribbing, I want to make, the
Right.
thread strong and corded up, then I'll spin it clockwise as if I'm looking down on it. And that makes it thin and more twisted up, and it makes it stronger.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to take a little bit of deer hair, just regular deer hair. This isn't very dark, so it is going to flare a little bit. Grab it by the tips and just take all of this short stuff and the under fur out. And I'll stack it. Run a little bit long on time. I apologize. Is there an Oregon show tonight?
Yeah, but no worries.
Okay. So I'm going to line my deer hair up so that those butts are going to go a little bit past the bend. And that's where I'll mark it with these fingers. Then I can go over and cut that deer hair. I want to spin it counterclockwise so it'll reach back toward my fingers and grab those tips. And flare them like that. See how it's a nice little sunburst? And I can even go through those butts a little bit to make sure it doesn't move anywhere. Then keeping that on top, now is when I want to twist my thread clockwise, get it nice and corded up. And then I want to gather that, just kind of medium wraps, and come back to the bend of the hook. Take a couple wraps right there. And then come back across. So now I've got that flared deer hair there, the yellow underbody. And I've left enough air in that hair by not compressing it too bad. So that's going to be good flotation. Now for the wing, I'm going to take a pretty, see, like that one's pretty curved. I want it to be pretty much symmetrical mallard flank feather. That one's pretty good. Zoom out some more here. So I want to take this wing, take this feather and stroke down these barbs to where I have the stem is a little bit shorter than the body. And I want that stem to actually be above where my wing is tied down. So that's about how much I want for this fly. The stem itself from in this section that I have stroked back, that stem is about the length of the body. So now I'm going to take these and try to fold them up. This makes the wing look better. It makes it lay better. If you fold these so now if you look at it that way, they're in a V shape, right? So now with the curve going down, I'm going to tie, I'm going to go a little bit further. About halfway down that stem that was left over, I'm going to take a couple of loose wraps, about 3 or 4 loose wraps, and then I'm going to pull this up and back where it comes through at the right length. Right about there. Twist it a little bit on me. That didn't turn out at all. Let me try this again. Grab another feather here. Do the same thing, stroke back those barbs to the right length. Right there. Then I want to fold them. If this doesn't work, I'll abort.
You know, Al showed that little foam folder they made, you know, for folding hair. Or for
That
folding
would
for,
definitely work, right? That would definitely work for this. Okay. So now I've got those folded up. And holding it tight. Pull it through a little bit more. I want that wing to be a little bit longer. And then wrap some thread in front of it to stand it up better. That's going to become my wing. Okay. So I'm going to leave that until my hackle is finished. So already got a grizzly and a brown selected. I'm going to tie those in with the colorful side facing me. And return the thread to the front. Then one at a time. Start with the brown. I'll do 2 or 3 wraps in the back. Three in the front. Then I'll grab the grizzly and just work that in with the brown. The grizzly kind of overpowers the brown, so you don't really need as much of it. So couple in back, couple in front. Should be enough. I'll do 2 wraps over that. And then fold it back. Work my head back there. And then whip finish. There we are. I've got poly yarn and everything. I'll flip those out of the way. About that hackle. Messed up my hackle here. Got it in my whip finish.
My wife let me borrow her thread zapper. That works
Yeah.
really good unless you get it too close. I kind of playing around with some thick flaws and made a mess. So I'll just recut and do the fly. It works nice, but you got to be really, really, really careful.
All right. Now for this Wally wing, I'm going to turn it towards me here a little bit. So on each side, you want to take about maybe 4 or 5 fibers and just start stripping them down. And then come to the other side of the rachis. Grab about 4 or 5. And strip those down all the way. Came apart, I think. Flip out that stem. So basically what you did was you stripped a little bit of material off the side of the rachis of the stem, and it has those fibers there. So you've got half the stem on this side and half the stem on the other side, and then you clip out the center of the stem, and that's about a D- Wally wing.
Well, I like your D- Wally wing, Mike.
I like this Wally wing better.
Hey,
That was
hey,
one,
Mike,
that was one try, so I thought I could go ahead and do it this time, but I think I was going back and forth too many times with that and,
Yeah.
and screwing it up.
I think it will catch fish just fine.
It absolutely will, and I'll fish it.
Mhm.
I think that's on a scale of A to Z, Mike.
I think that would do very good on a stick of dynamite.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, these got a little loose. Those should be a little tighter. And then that's a little bit far forward.